Alright, for her dress, I colored her dress Pumice Stone. But if you look at your picture, there is hardly any pumice stone on there. It's only to cast a shadow on the outside and these little pleats she has here, little folds. But the inside of the dress stays almost this white color of your paper. Okay, so I'm going to grab me a little bit of the pumice stone. And again, I'm going to start where I want it to be darkest. So I'm going to start right here along her sleeve. And I'm going to lay down a little bit of color. And then I'm going to wipe that little bit I still have left on my brush off. And I'm just going to smooth this out. And I have quite a bit on here, so I'm going to wipe my brush off again. And I'm just going to keep wiping it out here until I come clear to the end. But see how much, it's still pretty light right here at the edge of her sleeve, but it's dark right here in the fold. That's the way I want it to look. Okay, so I'm going to grab just a little bit of pumice stone on my brush. I'm going to go do the same exact thing to the other side. So around this little ruffle and down the edge of her sleeve. Wipe my brush off and use that little bit of ink I laid down to spread out onto her sleeve. And again, I'm wiping my brush off about halfway over because I want it to be pretty light out here at the edge. I want it to be a little bit colored by the ink, but I want it to be mostly dark in the edges. So I'm going to do that down here. So again, I'm going to do that for the edge of this side. So let's start on the edge of this pleat and carry it down to her hand. And my brush is running out of ink. Perfect. But I'm still going to wipe it off just in case there's a little bit extra. And then I'm going to use my brush to pull that line out into her dress. And I want to get the inside of her collar here too. I colored the ruffle pink, but I'm going to color the inside of her collar a different color. So let's get a little bit of color on there to get that started. Okay, so that's pretty good for our first layer. So again, we're going to let that dry, and we're going to go up here and we're going to work on her hair. And so for her hair, I'm going to add some Vintage Photo to that. Alright, so we're going to add Vintage Photo, so let me grab a little bit of that on the end of my brush. And so I've got just a little dab on the end of my brush, and I want it to be darkest in this crown of her head, so I'm going to add just a little bit of color right there. And I'm going to wipe my brush off because I still have a lot of ink on my brush. And I'm going to use that little bit just to spread it out away from her part. Same for this way. Okay, grab me a little bit more and we'll go add some shadows somewhere else. So I want to add some shadows down here where her hair kind of curls back in. And she's got a little curly Q right here, so I know it's going to be cast a little bit of shadow underneath that. So I'm going to grab a little bit under there. Right next to her face it's going to be darkest. And wipe your brush off and then use the ink that you laid down to pull up into her hair. And that lightens it too because you're pulling a little bit of the ink away. Okay, so lace them right next to her cheek. And then wipe your little bit you have left on your brush off. And just use your brush and your water to move that up and away. Let's add a little bit to the bottom of this little end of her ponytail here. I think I'll add a little bit up here at her parts dry, so I'm going to go ahead and add some more in there. So again, I'm going to lay it down at where her crown is. Wipe that little bit I have left on my brush off. And just use the ink I laid down. And if you start picking up a lot of ink on your brush, make sure to wipe that off. And I'm going to add a little bit more shadow on this side of her part. Okay, and I really like that, so I'm going to leave it that color. But if you wanted to, you could let that dry and then add a little bit more shading in there where you want it. But let's go back and add some more color down here on her dress. You want to be quick, you don't want your line to dry. Okay, we're going to let that dry. And I'm going to go down here and add some color to her socks. So for her socks, I did the same exact color as her dress. So I grabbed me a little bit of Pumice Stone. And I want my socks to be darkest on the inside of her foot and under her dress. So I'm going to lay down my line right underneath of her dress and down the inside of her sock. And then I'm going to wipe it off. I brush off, and then I'm going to use just water to pull it away. But remember now, I've picked up quite a bit of ink on my brush, so I want to wipe that off. And then pull just this light color clear to the edge of her sock. Same for this side, under her dress, down the inside of her foot. Wipe your brush off. Use your brush to just spread it out. Remember, you're picking up water, you're picking up a lot of ink dabbing on that line, so I don't want my brush to be saturated with ink. So if it looks like there's quite a bit, wipe it off and then finish off over to the side of her sock. Alright, while her dress is drying, we're going to add her socks are drying, let's add a little bit of color to her accents on her dress, and for that I use Victorian Velvet. So I'm going to pick me up a little bit of that. And I'm going to start up here on her ruffle on the top of her dress and just put a little color down along the edges and then wipe my brush off and then just wipe that out and cover up your white space. Okay, now that looks pretty light, but remember, you're going to let that dry, and you're going to come back and add some more color after it's done. Okay, so you're going to do the same thing for the little lace on the bottom of her sleeves. And these the lace on the bottom of her dress. And I want it to be lightest here in the middle, so I'm going to start out here on the outside and work my way in and let my brush run out of ink. And if it looks like it's still got a bit, wipe it off so that when you get to the middle here, there's hardly any left on there. Okay, and I'm going to color the hearts the same color. Okay, then I'm going to let those dry. And I'm going to go up here and define the lines on the top of my dress. So I'm going to grab me just a little bit of Pumice Stone on the end of my brush, and I'm going to just go straight down the line. Okay, and then I'm going to wipe my brush off, and I'm just going to take water and I'm going to tap it just to soften it just a little bit. And you don't have to do that. That's just how I wanted the creases to be a little bit more defined. And you could let this dry and then go back and add a little bit more and make them even more pronounced if you would want to. Alright, so while our dress is still drying, let's go down here and work on the bottom, on the ground. And so for that, I started out with Pumice Stone. So I'm going to grab me a little bit of Pumice Stone, and I want, remember the light source is coming from this side today, so I want it to be the lightest over here. So she's going to be casting a shadow this direction from her dress. But I'm going to lay down a little bit of color right here underneath of her feet, but I'm going to let it fade off over here onto the side. Okay, then we'll let that dry. And then for her ground down here, to give it a little bit more shadow, I went ahead and added some Walnut Stain right where she's standing. So I'm going to grab me just a little bitty bit on the end of my brush, and I'm going to put that right underneath of her sock. And wipe my brush off. I don't want to get too much. Kind of smooth it along. Maybe cast my shadow out a little bit. And just use water to tap it. Smooth it a little bit. Alright, so I think she looks pretty good, but again, if you wanted to, you could go back and add some more pink to her cheeks or darken up her face if you wanted it to be darker. It's all personal preference. You just layer on a small amount of ink at a time and put more layers on as you want them to be. Okay, so this month's kit came with a bottle of Perfect Pearls. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and attach my Tilda to my little green mat that I got in my kit. And I'm just going to stick her down like so. Okay, I'm going to take my Perfect Pearls. I'm going to give it a little shake so it's down at the end of the bottle. And I'm just going to, I wanted it to be in each of these little scalloped edges. So I just take my bottle and just squeeze out some and give it a little dot like that. And you can make your dots as big or as fat as you want. Okay, so I've got them on like that. And I went all the way around. But if you look at it, they're kind of poking up. So I take my my image and I just pat it on my hand like this. And that will flatten the little dots out. And this works a lot better if you do it before you put it on the card, because my dots on my card don't look this flat because I'd already attached it, and then I'm like, oh, let's do some perfect pearls. So definitely either put your Tilda on your mat or just put the dots on first and give it a little tap on your hand or on the countertop or whatever, and it flattens those dots out, and then let it dry because they're gonna be wet for a while. Okay, well, that's this month's card, and I hope to see you next month. Have a great day.